German Shepherd was beaten and thrown into a ditch. What baby did next left. Everyone in tears. The story you're about to listen will break your heart and then put it back together what this child did. For an abandoned dog will leave you speechless. Share where you're watching from in the comments below. The morning mist clung to the field surrounding Willowbrook like a protective blanket. This tiny village nestled between rolling hills and ancient forests was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business and where secrets rarely stayed buried for long. Ella Matthews stood at her kitchen window watching her 4-year-old son Liam playing with his wooden blocks on the living room floor. The early light caught his sandy brown hair, giving it an almost golden glow that made her heart ache with love. She sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the moment of peace before their morning walk. Liam, sweetheart, time to get your shoes on, she called softly. The boy looked up, his hazel eyes wide and solemn. He didn't speak, hadn't spoken a real word in almost 7 months. The doctors called it selective mutism, triggered by the accident that had taken his father. Ella called it heartbreak too deep for words. Liam stood carefully arranging his blocks in a perfect line before padding over to the door where his tiny blue sneakers waited. He touched them, then looked up at his mother. Yes, those ones, she said with an encouraging smile. Good job, baby. Morning walks had become sacred ritual recommended by Liam's therapist as a way to help with his sensory development. The consistency, the fresh air, the gentle exercise, all of it was supposed to help create pathways in his brain that trauma had disrupted. Ella didn't know if it was working, but she treasured these quiet mornings with her son's small hand in hers, the weight of it anchoring her to a world that had tilted sideways. The day Mark's car had swerved off that bridge, their usual path led through the meadow behind their cottage, a well-worn trail that eventually connected to the village center a mile away. But today something was different. They had barely passed the old oak tree when Liam suddenly stopped, his hand tensed in hers, and Ella looked down, surprised by the resistance. What is it, sweetheart? Liam's face had changed. His eyes were fixed on something in the distance, and a small crease appeared between his eyebrows. Without warning, he tugged her hand, pulling her off the path toward a rarely used gravel road that led to the back fields. Liam, that's not our way, Ella said gently, trying to redirect him, but Liam's grip tightened, and he pulled with a surprising strength. His eyes never left whatever invisible thing had captured his attention. Something about his intensity made Ella hesitate. Liam had always been unusually perceptive, even before the accident. Mark used to joke that their son could feel things others couldn't. The approaching rain before clouds gathered, the neighbor's cat hiding in their garden shed the exact moment his grandmother would call, seconds before the phone rang. Okay, she relented just for a little while the gravel crunched beneath their feet as they walked down the unfamiliar path. Old farm equipment rusted in the tall grass on either side, remnants of Willowbrook's agricultural past. The morning dew soaked the hem of Ella's jeans, but she barely noticed. Liam's pace quickened, his small boots moving with purpose, until suddenly he stopped so abruptly that Ella nearly tripped over him. They stood at the edge of an old drainage ditch that ran alongside the gravel road. It was deep, maybe 4 feet, with muddy sides and stagnant water pulled at the bottom. What? Ella started to ask, but her words died in her throat. Liam was crying. Silent tears rolled down his cheeks as he pointed insistently toward the ditch, not just anywhere in the ditch, but at a specific spot where the morning sun caught something dark and unmoving, half submerged in the mud. Ella's heart hammered against her ribs as she stepped closer to the edge, squinting to make out what had upset her son so deeply. At first it looked like a pile of discarded trash, something wrapped in dark material, tangled with what appeared to be wires or rope. Then it moved, just the slightest twitch, but unmistakable. Oh my God, Ella whispered, dropping to her knees at the edge of the ditch. A dog, a German Shepherd, its once proud body now broken and filthy, lay half buried in the mud. Its dark fur was matted with blood and dirt, and something, rope or wire, was wrapped tightly around its midsection. One of its legs was bent at an unnatural angle, and its breathing came in shallow, labored gasps. Ella's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a cry of horror. Who would do such a thing? The dog had clearly been beaten, bound, and thrown into the ditch to die a slow, agonizing death. Liam, stay back, she warned, her voice shaking, but when she turned, Liam was already scrambling down the muddy slope toward the injured animal. Liam, no. Ella lunged forward, terror spiking through her veins. An injured dog, especially one This size could be dangerous, unpredictable. But Liam moved with a strange certainty. He approached the dog. Slowly, his small body tense with caution but not fear. When he was just a few feet away, he stopped and sank to his knees in the mud. The German Shepherd's eyes fluttered open, deep amber eyes clouded with pain. It lifted its head and inched a low growl rumbling in its throat. Ella froze halfway down the slope, her heart in her mouth. Liam, she whispered urgently. Don't move. But Liam wasn't listening. With excruciating slowness, he extended his small hand toward the dog's massive head. Ella wanted to scream, to lunge forward and snatch her child away from those powerful jaws, but something held her back, the same instinct that had made her follow Liam down this path in the first place. The dog's growl faded, its amber eyes locked onto Liam's hazel ones. In a gaze so intense it seemed to crackle in the morning air, the moments stretched, suspended in time, as child and animal regarded each other with an understanding that transcended language. Then, impossibly, the dog's tail moved, not a wag exactly, it barely had the strength for that, but a deliberate twitch that stirred the mud around it. Liam's hand touched the dog's head, the gentlest of touches, just his fingertips against the dirty fur between the animal's ears. The dog closed its eyes, a shuddering breath escaping its battered body. Ella couldn't breathe, she couldn't move, she could only watch as her silent, traumatized son connected with this broken creature in a way that defied explanation. Then Liam turned to look at her, and Ella's heart shattered all over again. His eyes were filled with a desperate plea, more words than he had spoken in months. Help him, please, Mom, help him. Ella slid the rest of the way down the embankment, mud squelching beneath her sneakers. Up close, the dog's condition was even worse than she had feared. Its ribs showed through matted fur, and dried blood crusted around several wounds on its side. The wire, for it was wire she could see now, had cut deeply into the flesh around its middle. Oh, you poor thing, she whispered, reaching out a tentative hand. The dog's eyes opened again, regarding her wearily but without aggression. Those eyes, they held such an unnerving intelligence, such deep pain, that Ella had to look away. We need to get help, she said, more to herself than to Liam. She reached for her phone, but as she pulled it from her pocket, her heart sank. No signal. Of course there wouldn't be, not in this secluded spot. We'll have to go back, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. We'll call Der Winters from home, he'll know what to do. But Liam shook his head violently, his hands clutching at her sleeve. His eyes darted to the sky, and Ella followed his gaze. Dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, a spring storm approaching fast. You're right, she admitted. We can't leave him here in the rain. She glanced around, desperately trying to formulate a plan. But I don't know if we can move him, honey. He's badly hurt and he's big. Liam's face set in a determined expression she knew all too well. It was the same stubborn look Mark had worn whenever he'd faced an impossible task. Without hesitation, the boy began to dig at the mud surrounding the dog's body, his small hands scooping away the heavy, wet earth. Liam, Ella started, then stopped. Instead, she joined him, her fingers sinking into the cold mud as they worked together to free the animal. The first drops of rain fell as they dug, fat splashes that quickly turned into a steady drizzle. The dog watched them work, its eyes following their movements with a mixture of weariness and what almost looked like hope. We need something to help us move him, Ella muttered, looking around. She shrugged out of her jacket an old denim thing that had once been Mark's and laid it beside the dog. If we can get him onto this, maybe we can pull him up. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the ditch into a slippery mess. Mud caked their clothes, their hands, even Liam's face where he had absently wiped his cheek. But the boy worked with single-minded focus, and gradually they freed the dog's body from the earth that had nearly become its grave. The wire was another matter. It was wrapped tightly around the dog's torso, cutting into flesh that had begun to heal around it in places. Ella's stomach turned at the sight. We can't take it off here, she decided, trying to keep her voice from shaking. We might hurt him more. Dear Winters will have to do it. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by a rumble of thunder that seemed to shake the ground beneath them. The dog flinched, a whimper escaping its throat. Liam immediately placed his hand on its head again, and remarkably the animal seemed to calm at his touch. With the dog now mostly freed from the mud, Ella positioned her jacket alongside its body. Okay, buddy, she said softly to the dog, this is going to hurt, but we have to get You out of here, she glanced at Liam. I'm going to try to roll him onto the jacket. Can you move to his head and keep him calm? Liam nodded solemnly, positioning himself near the dog's face. His small hand never left the animal's head, stroking gently between its ears. Here we go, Ella murmured with as much care as she could manage. She began to roll the dog's body onto the jacket. The animal let out a yelp of pain that cut through Ella like a knife, but it didn't struggle or bite. Somehow it seemed to understand they were trying to help, and then something extraordinary happened. As the dog lay panting on the jacket, its eyes fixed on Liam, the boy opened his mouth and made a sound. It wasn't quite a word, more a strange guttural noise, but it was the first voluntary sound Ella had heard from her son in 7 months. She stared at him, rain streaming down her face, mingling with tears. She hadn't realized she was crying. Liam said again, more clearly this time. His hand moved rhythmically over the dog's head. Ray Moose. The dog's tail twitched again, stronger this time, and its ears perked slightly despite its obvious pain. Remus, Ella whispered, her voice cracking. Is that his name? Liam nodded with absolute certainty, as if he'd known it all along. Okay, then, Ella said, swallowing hard against the lump in her throat. Remus it is. Let's get Remus home. Getting the dog out of the ditch proved to be an almost impossible task. The makeshift sled of her jacket helped, but the mud made everything treacherously slippery, and the animal's weight, even as undernourished as it was considerable. Twice they lost their footing, sliding back down the embankment in a mess of mud and cursing on Ella's part and silent determination on Liam's. The rain pounded down relentlessly, turning the gravel road into a small river. Thunder cracked overhead, and Reese trembled with each boom but made no attempt to flee or fight. He simply watched Liam with those intelligent amber eyes, as if the boy were a lifeline in a stormy sea. On their third attempt, Ella managed to drag the jacket up far enough that the dog's front paws could find purchase on solid ground. With what must have been excruciating effort, Reese pulled himself forward, his back legs dragging uselessly behind him. That's it, Ella encouraged, her arms burning with the strain. Good boy, Remus, almost there. Liam scrambled up ahead of them, then turned to help, his small hands finding grip on the soaked denim of the jacket. Together with one final heave, they pulled the German Shepherd onto level ground. Remus collapsed immediately, his sides heaving with the effort, but his eyes remained fixed on Liam, who knelt beside him, oblivious to the rain and mud. His hand once again finding that spot between the dog's ears. Ella looked down at them, her silent son and this broken dog, and felt something shift inside her chest, a door opening where one had been firmly shut. Now comes the hard part, she said, pushing her soaked hair from her face. We have to get him all the way home. The walk that normally took 15 minutes stretched into an hour. Ella fashioned a better sled using her jacket and Liam's raincoat tied together, but progress was agonizingly slow. Remus tried to help when he could, pushing himself forward with his front legs, but it was clear every movement caused him pain. They avoided the main road, taking a longer route through the fields. Ella wasn't sure why, perhaps because she didn't want to explain to curious neighbors why she and her son were dragging a half-dead dog through the village in a thunderstorm, or perhaps because some instinct warned her that whoever had done this to Remus might still be looking for him. By the time they reached their cottage, all three were exhausted. Ella's arms felt like rubber, and even Liam's determined energy had flagged. He trudged beside the makeshift sled, one hand still touching Remus, as if afraid the dog might disappear if he let go. Almost there, Ella gasped as they approached the garden gate. Just a little further inside, she quickly spread old towels on the kitchen floor, creating a makeshift bed. Together they maneuvered Remus onto the towels. The dog sank down with a sigh that seemed to come from its very soul, its eyes closing briefly in what could only be relief. Ellis stood back, surveying the damage properly for the first time in the harsh kitchen. Light Reese injuries looked even worse. The wire cut deeply into his flesh, and dried blood matted his fur in several places. His back leg was definitely broken, and he was so thin she could count every rib. I need to call Dr. Winters, she said, reaching for her phone with trembling hands. She glanced at Liam, who sat cross-legged beside Remus, his muddy hand resting lightly on the dog's side. Can you stay with him while I make the call? Liam nodded. Without looking up, his focus was entirely on the dog, whose amber eyes had opened again to return the boy's steady gaze. Ella stepped into the hallway, her mind racing. The Winters was the only vet. In Willowbrook, an older man with a gruff manner but gentle hands, he picked up on the third ring. "Winters," he barked. Into the phone. "Dear Winters, it's Ella Matthews," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. We found a dog at German Shepherd. He's been badly hurt, beaten, I think, and tied up with wire. Someone threw him in a ditch." There was a brief silence. "How bad?" "Bad, broken leg. Cuts, possible internal injuries. He's extremely thin, but he's alert. He's not aggressive. In fact, he's remarkably calm, especially with Liam." Another pause. "Bring him in. I don't think we can move him again," Ella admitted. "It was all we could do to get him home." Dr. Winter sighed heavily. "I'll come to you, but Ella," he hesitated, "be careful. A dog in that condition, no matter how calm it seems, pain and fear can make any animal dangerous." "I know," Ella said quietly, "but there's something about him, doctor. Something I can't explain it." "Liam found him." Liam spoke. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long that Ella thought the call had dropped. Finally, Der Winters spoke again, his voice noticeably softer. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." When Ella returned to the kitchen, she found Liam had brought his water bottle to Remus. The dog was lapping weakly at the water, cooped in the boy's small hands. "Good thinking, sweetheart," she said, kneeling beside them. "Herr Winters is coming to help." Reese's eyes shifted to her, and again Ella was struck by the intelligence in that gaze. This was no ordinary dog. There was something in those amber depths, a wisdom and understanding that sent a shiver down her spine. She reached out slowly, giving him time to see her hand approach. When her fingers finally touched his damp fur, he didn't flinch or growl. Instead, he leaned slightly into her touch, and Ella felt tears spring to her eyes again. "Who are you?" she whispered. "And what happened to you?" As if in answer, Remus shifted slightly, wincing with pain. Something metallic glinted beneath the matted fur of his neck. Ella leaned closer, pushing the wet hair aside to reveal a strange tag half hidden under the remnants of what must have once been a collar. It wasn't a typical dog tag. Instead of the usual round or bone shape, this was a small metal rectangle, almost like a military dog tag. Most of it was obscured by dirt and possibly blood, but as Ella wiped it clean with her thumb, she could make out a series of numbers and letters etched into the metal, and at the bottom a single word: Remus Ellis. Breath caught in her throat. She looked at Liam, who was watching her with those solemn hazel eyes. "You knew," she whispered. "Somehow you knew his name." Liam's hand moved to touch the tag, his small finger tracing the letters as if to confirm what his heart had already told him. Then he looked up at his mother, and for the first time in 7 months, Ella saw something like hope in her son's eyes. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance as the storm began to move away, but inside their small cottage kitchen, something new was brewing, something that felt dangerously like the beginning of an adventure that would change all their lives forever. Dr. Winters arrived exactly 20 minutes later, his ancient pickup truck sputtering to a stop outside the cottage. He was a tall, lean man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetual frown that belied his gentle nature. He'd been Willowbrook's veterinarian for almost 40 years, and some said he understood animals better than people. Ella met him at the door, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly at the sight of his familiar weathered face. "Thank you for coming," she said, stepping aside to let him in. Herr Winters nodded curtly, already removing his rain-spattered coat. "Where is he?" "Kitchen," Ella replied, leading the way. "And Dr. Winters," she lowered her voice, "I've never seen Liam react to anyone or anything like this, not since." She didn't need to finish the sentence. The veterinarian's expression softened momentarily. He had treated the Matthews family cat for years before it passed and had known Liam since he was a baby. "Let's see what we've got," he said simply. The scene in the kitchen stopped Dr. Winters in his tracks. Liam sat cross-legged on the floor, the massive German Shepherd's head cradled in his lap. The boy was humming softly, a tuneless, gentle sound that seemed to be calming both of them. At the sight of strangers, Reese lifted his head slightly, a low rumble building in his throat. "It's okay, boy," Dr. Winters said in the same tone he used with all animals, calm, authoritative kind. "I'm here to help." Reese's ears twitched and his eyes, those uncannily intelligent eyes, assessed the newcomer. After a moment, he laid his head back down on Liam's lap, but his gaze remained fixed on the veterinarian. Dear Winters knelt slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He set his medical bag on the floor beside him and looked at Liam. I need to examine him, he explained. Can you help me keep him calm? Liam nodded solemnly, his small hand never leaving Remus' head. The examination was methodical and careful. Dr. Winters checked the dog's vital signs first, then gently explored each injury, murmuring softly to both Remus and Liam as he worked the wire. Around the dog's midsection was his primary concern. This needs to come off, he said grimly, but we have to be careful. It's embedded in some places. From his bag he produced wire cutters and a pair of surgical scissors. Ella, I need your help. Hold his head steady gently now. Ella moved to Remus' front. Placing her hands on either side of his massive head, the dog's eyes found hers, and she was struck again by their depth. It's okay, she whispered, we're helping you. Dr. Winters began the delicate process of cutting away the wire. Liam continued his soft humming, his fingers buried in the fur behind Remus' ears. Remarkably, the dog remained still, only occasional tremors betraying his pain. Almost done, Dr. Winters murmured after several tense minutes. Last piece. As the final section of wire was pulled free, Reese let out a long, shuddering sigh. A small whimper escaped him, the only sound of pain he had made during the entire procedure. Liam's humming grew louder in response, and he bent down to press his forehead against the dog's. Dr. Winters sat back on his heels, dropping the bloodied wire onto a towel with undisguised disgust. Someone did this deliberately, he said, his voice tight with anger. Wrapped it tight enough to cause pain but not kill. Quickly, this is no accident. Ella felt sick. Who would do such a thing? Dr. Winters shook his head, already moving on to the next injury, the broken leg. After a careful examination, he sighed. Clean break of the femur needs to be set and splinted. I can do it here, but he'll need to be sedated. He reached into his bag for a syringe and a small bottle. This will put him out for about an hour, long enough to set the leg and clean these wounds properly. As he prepared the injection, Ella remembered something. Wait, there's a tag on his collar. It has his name on it. Dr. Winters paused, his bushy eyebrows drawing together. Show me. Ella gently tilted Remus' head to reveal the metal tag. Dr. Winters leaned closer, his expression changing from professional concern to something else entirely. Weariness, perhaps even alarm. That's not a standard dog tag, he said quietly, reaching into his pocket for a small flashlight. He shone it directly on the tag, reading the numbers and letters etched into the metal. JTR 7429E. And then Reese, he sat back, a troubled look on his face. This looks military, or maybe government special forces sometimes use dogs for. He trailed off, glancing at Liam. For what? Ella pressed. Dr. Winters shook his head. Let me finish treating him first. The next hour passed in tense silence as the veterinarian worked. After sedating Remus, he meticulously cleaned each wound, set and splinted the broken leg, and administered antibiotics and pain medication. Liam refused to leave the dog's side even when Ella suggested he go change out of his wet, muddy clothes. He simply shook his head, his eyes never leaving Remus's sleeping form. By the time Dr. Winters was packing up his equipment, the rain had stopped completely and weak evening sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows. Remus lay peacefully on his makeshift bed, now properly bandaged and clean, his breathing deep and regular. He'll sleep for another 20 minutes or so, Drive Winter said, washing his hands at the sink. The painkillers will keep him comfortable through the night. I've left more medications there on the counter with instructions. Ella nodded gratefully. Thank you. What do we owe you? Dr. Winters waved her question away. Nothing today, but Ella. He glanced at Liam, who was still sitting beside Remus, then back at her. We need to talk outside. Ella hesitated, looking at her son. He'll be fine, Dr. Winters assured her. The dog won't wake for a while yet. Liam, I'll be right outside with Dr. Winters. Okay, just on the porch. Liam gave a tiny nod, but his attention remained fixed on Remus. Outside, the air smelled fresh and clean after the rain. Dr. Winters didn't waste time with pleasantries. That tag, he began without preamble, is not something you'd find on an ordinary dog. The format alphanumeric code followed by a name. That's something I've seen before, years ago when I worked briefly with a research laboratory. A laboratory, Ella repeated, confusion evident in her voice. What kind of research? Dr. Winters hesitated, his weathered face troubled. Military applications, mainly training animals for Special purposes. The last time I saw a tag like that was on a dolphin being trained to detect underwater mines. Ella felt a chill that had nothing to do with her damp clothes. You're saying Reese is some kind of military dog? I'm saying it's a possibility we need to consider, he replied carefully, the level of training evident in his behavior. Maintaining calm during painful procedures, his immediate connection with Liam. These aren't typical even for well-trained service dogs. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. There's a facility about 60 miles from here, very secretive. I've heard rumors about advanced animal training programs, but nothing specific. Ella crossed her arms, suddenly feeling defensive. So what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you be careful, Dr. Winter said. Bluntly, someone went to great lengths to hurt that dog and dispose of him. If he is what I suspect, a valuable, highly trained military asset, they might come looking for him or to finish what they started. Ella murmured, glancing toward the kitchen window where she could just make out the top of Liam's head, possibly. Dr. Winters agreed grimly, but there's something else that concerns me. He hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. Liam's connection with him, it was immediate, wasn't it? Almost as if they recognized each other. Ella nodded slowly. Liam led me straight to him, like he knew exactly where to find him, and the name Remus, he said it before we ever saw the tag. Dr. Winters's eyebrows rose. He spoke just the name, Ella clarified. But that's the first word he's spoken since Mark's accident. The veterinarian was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. There are some research programs, he said finally, that focus on enhanced empathy between handlers and animals, developing bonds that go beyond normal training. Some of the theories involve neurological connection, a kind of shared awareness. Ellis stared at him. You're saying what, that Liam and Remus are connected somehow? That's not possible. 6 months ago I would have agreed with you, Dr. Winters said, but there have been advancements in the field that are well remarkable and troubling. He turned to her fully, his expression grave. You should know that if the dog belongs to the facility I'm thinking of keeping him, could be dangerous. These are powerful people, Ella, people who don't like loose ends. Fear coiled in Ella's stomach. What should I do? For now, nothing drastic, he advised. Keep him inside, out of sight. If he recovers as I expect, he should be able to walk with the splint in a few days. I'll come by to check on him tomorrow. He hesitated, then added, and I'll make some discreet inquiries, see if I can find out who he might belong to. Subscribe for part 2.